Coach mix in here.
All right, so let's go ahead and do our Coach of the Year. Davis, who you taking?
I'm taking the man, the myth, the
The
legend,
legend.
Eric Spoelstra. We know what he's capable of and how talented of a coach he is. He's been able to manage big personalities in the past with the big three. And Pat Riley has had faith in him through hard times with the Miami Heat organization as well for good reason. And that's because he is a cerebral coach. And not only that, he is the best coach mid game in terms of making adjustments around different players, different situations. We saw kind of some of those macro level adjustments that he was able to make with the Miami Heat's run the bubble, being a surprise team out of nowhere. I think 99% of that team's success in the bubble was due to Eric Spoelstra. And I know that, as a key factor, why I think Spoelstra will win this award is because the Heat will. It's even wild that we're saying this, but the Heat are going to surprise a lot of teams next season and could even be a top three team out in the East. And I think if they do that, um, you know, teams and voters aren't going to be looking as the Heat's bubble run as a little bit of a fluke, a little bit of a weird situation, and more of, okay, no, this team is actually legit, not only because of the players and the roster composition, but because Eric Spoelstra is, one of the best minds in basketball. And I think that he'll also win this award because of the success they had in the bubble, how surprising it was. Nobody saw it coming. And yes, these are regular season awards, but at the same time, the voters will probably be looking to give. This is Spolstra's award to lose, is what I'm trying to say. Because going into this season, everyone has it on their mind that due to the bubble success, Spolstra is probably the best coach in the NBA. And he did not get that award recognition last year. Nick Nurse did. And Billy Donovan was the other close candidate. And so I think Spolstra deserves some recognition for what happened last season, but also what he's going to be able to accomplish this season is just going to be another nail in the peg for why he should win Coach of the Year. And, if I'm looking at it over Steve Nash, which I have no idea how he's going to do, I've expressed some concerns in the past with, being able to get this Nets team integrated day one without having a little bit of struggles. And so I think for those reasons, I would not be surprised if Eric Spoelstra walks away with this award with a unanimous even
Unanimous. Okay.
decision.
So I think that's a great pick. I think it's fair to say that he's the best coach in the NBA, or at least argue that point. However, Coach of the Year, in my opinion, doesn't go to the best coach in the NBA. It goes to
Nick
the.
Nurse won it last year.
I don't know if he was the
I,
best
I
coach of
think
the. I don't think he was the best
uh,
coach in the NBA. I also don't think he
I
should
think
have
he's
won it
top
last year.
three. He's
I
a
think
top
Billy.
three coach every year in terms of like. Okay, let's.
But I think this
Okay,
also goes with that.
finish your point, and then I have a question for you.
Okay. Um. So the reason why I would not pick Eric Spoelstra is because I think a lot of what Coach of the Year comes down to are a surprise team that does exceeds expectations. Obviously, Oklahoma City Thunder last year, that's a good example. Or it's a team that sort of ascends into the upper echelon of their conference, that 2 seed. That's how we saw Coach Bud win it with the Bucks a couple years ago when they finally started to ascend up into the Eastern Conference. And so that's why I have Steve Nash as the coach. I do think there's very clear concerns. The dude has never coached a minute in the NBA. But Steve Nash was known as being a great leader when he was a player. And I mean, that was his job as the starting point guard for the Suns, 2-time MVP. I think he is someone that can, without a doubt, do an excellent job of working with KD and Kyrie out in Brooklyn and really getting that roster to sort of come together and glue together. I think if the Brooklyn Nets could overtake the Milwaukee Bucks as the number 1 seed in the East, which is entirely possible if KD is KD this season, I think they give it to Steve Nash. I really do. I think if they beat out the Bucks in the East at that one slot, I think it'd be without question go to Steve Nash.
No, that's fair. That's a good point. I think people are sleeping on the Brooklyn Nets in some aspects, because I think even if Kevin Durant and Kyrie struggle in terms of their on-court synergy, they still have probably the best bench, you could argue, in the NBA. And we've
Spencer
talked about
Dinwiddie, Karis
how,
LeVert.
yeah,
They signed Joe
absolutely.
Harris again.
Yeah,
Jared
like
Allen. I mean,
they have a
they
lot of
are
role
deep.
players they can
Yeah.
depend on. And so even if some of the star players are struggling, I still think they're going to be able to win games without a question. They have that guy in the clutch, those two guys in the clutch, you could even say.
Yeah.
Kyrie's had some very clutch moments in his career as well. And so, I think down the stretch, they'll be able to close out games very well. And, during, third quarter, late second quarter, when things are getting ugly, a lot of the second units are out there. you know, the Brooklyn Nets are just going to be extending their leads.
And I
And
think they're
so
also
I
going to
think they can
respect
absolutely
Steve
be.
Nash because, I mean, Steve Nash was an incredible player and he has more on his resume than KD and Kyrie do presently constructed. Actually, I take that back. KD has better on his resume than Steve Nash, but he's got, I forgot about the finals or the chips. But I do think they're going to, they respect him. And I don't think Steve Nash needs to be like the great. He's not going to be the best coach in the NBA. There's better coaches than him. Nick Nurse and Eric Spoelstra and these coaches who can construct these sort of defensive schemes and throw out all different things and tactics at you are better coaches. But I don't think that's what Coach of the Year goes to. I don't think it really goes to that best coach. I really think it comes down because we don't really see great coaching until the playoffs. Like, I feel like that's when we really can say, wow, like that coach actually made a difference in this game or this series. And so, I mean, we looked at a lot of that with like Eric Spoelstra against the Bucks. I mean, the defensive schemes he threw at the Bucks were incredible, and it's the reason why the Bucks lost. Nick Nurse throwing out these different things to really try and hurt Jason Tatum. It's the reason why that series went to 7. And so, I
And
just
I
think
think I do
the
think
Nets
that
can. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think if Steve Nash wins that award, a lot of it's also going to be because Mike D'Antoni is an assistant coach, and he's a good coach in his own respect.
Yeah.
And that's I mean, he's by far the best assistant coach in the league right now.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's even close. And having that level of experience for a first-time NBA coach with a lot of player experience, a lot of leadership, as we've talked about in the past, I think it's going to go a long way. But without further ado, I kind of wanted to bring something else up before posing a question. That's because you talked about Steve Nash. I saw it's quite interesting on the GM survey. They do a yearly survey that gets put out. One of the questions was, out of all the current active NBA players, who's going to be the best head coach? And by far, it was like 83 or 87% of the GM said Chris Paul. And that got me real excited because I hadn't even thought of that as a prospect. But, all these GMs probably hear rumblings and rumors about, which players are going to, continue, whether it's being in the front office or, being a coach or, taking some type of next step,
Yeah.
whether they go into media. And so I think Chris Paul as a coach, just, a couple of years down the line, is just an exciting prospect to think about.
I will say this. I think Chris Paul would be an amazing head coach, but that kind of surprises me because I think there's no way in the world I would not choose LeBron James as a head coach. There
They
is
probably don't think
no
he's going to be a
way.
head coach. They probably
I
think
mean,
he's
I think
going to be
that's
a
a fair
GM.
point. I will say if we like
I could
if
see
I
the
had
late LeBron
if I
being
knew they were
a.
gonna if I knew they were both gonna be head coaches, I mean I'm choosing LeBron. But I mean Chris Paul I think Chris Paul would actually be a fantastic head coach. I would agree with that. That's a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. But my question for you is, we're talking about how this award is not given to the best coach in the league. So if you are, they do a franchise expand or an NBA expansion draft, and you are the owner of a new team, who do you pick as your coach if you can just have any coach in the league currently and just poach him for free? Who do you take? Who do you think's the best coach?
I think I'd take Nick Nurse by a hair over Eric Spoelstra. A hair. I would be fine with either one of the two, but I do think Nick Nurse right now is the best coach in the NBA.
How close do you think Brad Stevens and Steve Kerr are? I'm just curious.
I don't think Steve Kerr is that high. I think out of those 4 coaches, Steve Kerr is the best offensive-minded coach. But to me, when I want a coach, I want someone who's defensively gifted because I think more often than not, the offense takes care of itself. I really do. I think we see that a lot when D'Antoni was a coach. When probably one of the best offensive coaches we've seen in a long, long time.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. But I think these defensive-minded coaches are the ones that really can get things done, especially in the playoffs. And so I probably wouldn't go for Steve Kerr. And then when you compare Brad Stevens, I think Eric Spoelstra and Nick Nurse are just both better defensive coaches than him.
So if you want defensive coach, you should be going with Tom Thibodeau or Stan Van Gundy, my dude. Talk about defense.
Oh, Van Gundy.
Oh, man.
I wanted to say this, though. So for head coaches, last year, in my opinion, I thought Billy Donovan should have won it because I think what the Thunder did was just incredible last year. So I thought about 3 teams that I thought could sort of play similar. They won't be as unexpected necessarily as the Thunder, but 3 teams that sort of might be able to ascend next season unexpectedly, and that their coaches might sort of get tossed around in that coach of the year conversation. So the first one is Lloyd Pierce from the Atlanta Hawks. They're someone that without a doubt could ascend in the East very heavily. The second one is Monty Williams with the Phoenix Suns. I think that's a team that also with Chris Paul could really just blow people's expectations out of the water. And then the last one, which we've talked about, is Portland and Terry Stotts as their coach. I think Portland's a team that, I mean, if Dame has sort of an MVP kind of caliber season and their team is just disgusting, I think if they can sort of slide up into maybe a top 3 in the West scenario, Terry Stotts might snag that award from someone. So
I'll throw one other name into the mix, and it's someone we've already talked about, but it's Billy Donovan. I think the Chicago Bulls could be a big surprise team. They have a lot of like young talent. We've talked to great.
I'll be very surprised.
I'm just saying if they sneak into the playoffs, whether it's through the 9 seed or 8 seed, I think absolutely Billy Donovan will get it, especially because he got snubbed last year.
If they make the play-in tournament, I'd be surprised.
We'll see. You never know.
I think if they're
a dark horse team.
They exceeded expectations.
Oh, absolutely. But last year, they also definitely were underwhelming, and they had higher expectations going into the season. And so
that's because they had one of the worst coaches in NBA history.
That is true, and now they have one of the better coaches in NBA.
That's true. All right, well, with that wraps up the Coach of the Year segment.